I guess it was just something I figured out at a young age, that this is where I fit in to the team, and this is where I'm going to add the most value to the team. I was never a big scorer at all at any level. I was never, a Brian Leach type of defenseman. And I knew that, and I was kind of, pretty honest with myself. And then I knew I could stop guys though, and I was always good at that. And then that became, a source of pride for me. And so I wanted to be known as the guy that you trusted to shut down, the Jason Podollans of the world.
That was the Toronto Maple Leafs first-round draft pick, 15th overall in the 1995 entry draft, Jeff Ware, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podollan. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podollan, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podollan, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podollan. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to your first program. Awesome to have you here. I've been seeing the numbers increase, so I assume there's a few new listeners here. And if you are an old-time listener, well, welcome back. Always awesome to have you. And today we are going to be talking with Jeff Ware. Jeff Ware, for the Toronto Maple Leaf fans that are in their, probably born in their 70s or 60s, maybe even 50s. If you're listening to this, you would remember Jeff Ware. A 1995 first-round pick of the Cliff Fletcher era, and he was 15th overall. Ended up playing World Juniors for Mike Babcock, won a gold medal with that team in 1997, and almost made the Toronto Maple Leafs out of camp after his draft year. So in the 1996-97 season, played 13 games for Toronto, went back down to Oshawa, had success there, won a championship actually in Oshawa, won the World Junior Championship that year, and then Jeff and I met in St. John's after I got traded. So I joined Waresy there, and unbeknownst to me, although I knew that he had knee surgery, as we get on within the interview here, I had no idea how much it was affecting him and what he was going through. I do know that he was going through some stuff for sure when I was there playing with him. There was some off-ice, stuff that he was for sure dealing with, but never talked about it, never discussed it, didn't really know, and we get into it all here in this interview, and Jeff's just super open about everything that he went through there, and we recognize, in the discussion that you're about to hear, that it was a different time. Support levels were definitely different. The what would be called player development by NHL teams is vastly different than how it is today. The isolation factor of playing in St. John's, the lack of discussion and communication from Toronto at the time, all of this, being a part of both of our experiences at the pro level, and Jeff, with all the spotlight that would come with being Toronto's first round pick, to his own point, he didn't do an amazing job of dealing with it and trying to deal with a limited physical facility, while the mental pressures of just staying in the lineup and what was being asked of him on the ice and how to change his game and all these types of things. There was a lot going on for a 20-year-old young man. And anyways, there's, to this day, he says it's still kind of one of those things that, for lack of a better word, haunts him, to be the first round pick of the Leafs that kind of never panned out. And then we talk about the things that you can control as an athlete and the things that you can't, and and finding perspective after reflection and self-assessment and all these other words that we use during this. That Jeff is now in a good spot, and he's thankful for everything that happened. But there was definitely times where he wasn't, like where it didn't seem like things were working out, and it didn't seem like life was fair, and it didn't seem like things were as they should be. And yeah, man, life's life's life, and we all go through our things, and this is really a story of what could have been, I guess, in that scenario. A high draft prospect from the OHL. He was 5th overall. He shares here, and a world junior player, and somebody they thought was going to be a hometown boy from Toronto that played in Toronto forever, and ended up playing 15 games for them, and then ended up getting 6 with Florida a little later on, and then a knee kind of ended his career. So. For those of you who don't know Jeff as the hockey player, you're going to find out a lot more about him here as a human. And Jeff is he's just a real good guy, very well spoken, very articulate, pensive, thoughtful. I think he does a great job sharing here, and gives you a little bit of an insight into what is actually going on at the highest levels as far as when it gets real. I mean, when you're playing for checks. When there's pressure on the line, when you're supposed to have these expectations, personal and external, that it mounts, and there's a lot going on. So, and at the end of the day, we're all just people too. Like, that's the other thing, right? Like, we identify as being hockey players, but we're just people trying to make it work. Trying to make it work out the best we can. And back in our day, there wasn't much thought about how the person was making it work. It was just whether you were getting it done or not. So anyways, without further ado, I really enjoyed this interview. This was a good, honest, heartfelt discussion with an old teammate, and a really good guy. So I bring you my conversation with Jeff Ware. Welcome to the program, Mr. Jeff Ware.
Hey, Jason, good to be here.
Hey, man, it's been a long time. We had a little bit of chance to catch up kind of on DM and just before I press record. But other than that, it has I'm just looking at the stat sheet here, man. St. John's Maple Leafs, 1999. Actually, 1998, I think, was the last time we actually played together. That's a long time ago.
Yeah. I'm an old man now.
Well, and I'm 1 year older than you, so watch your mouth there, sir. How's it been going, man? Like, what do you have any hockey players yourself? I don't know any of that kind of stuff. Do you got any boys playing?
Yeah, I have a boy and a girl. My boy is 11, just turned, and my daughter's 8. He's playing. We're in North Carolina right now, and he's playing rec hockey. So it's not too. There's not too much pressure. It's just for fun, and it's the caliber isn't the same as it is back home in Canada, but they're having a good time, which is fun. And then my daughter, she's doing some skating in the wintertime as well. So so we still have a little bit of hockey in our lives, but it's not the same level as it was in the past.
Yeah. Did that reconnect you back to the sport again, like that he's playing?
Yeah, it did. Like, after I quit, not quit. After I retired because of my knee injuries, that was 2002, and it was a tough transition for sure. So just for my mental state, I kind of had a pretty hard cut off in hockey, and I kind of walked away from it for a number of years. And then after I had my son, he started to skate when we were living up in Toronto, and just getting outside in the wintertime and being on the the frozen ponds, the magic comes back, and so it's been fun. It's been good to come back to the game.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm super thankful to my boys too. I have 3. 13, 12, and 10 now, and they're all players, and wannabe players. Like, that's like they're kind of little cutouts of me, right? Like, that's what they all think that they want to do, and they want to be hockey players when they grow up and get older, and their involvement in the sport like really brought me back into hockey. And I wouldn't be having this conversation with you right now if they didn't exist, because I was I cut ties at 30, right, when I was done, and I was happy. I was happily moving forward and moving on with life and how things go. And then they wanted to start playing of no push by me. Like, their mother wanted us to be a skiing family, right? So that didn't go very well. I knew, like, we tried hard too, right? Like, we tried pretty hard. We have a ski hill up here locally, and there was just one day, like, you couldn't have a more gorgeous day, like, for skiing, right? Like, blue sky, the sun was coming down. It was, it was probably like -3, so it wasn't cold in the chairlift. The snow was great, and we're on like our second run, and the boys are like, when are we gonna finish this so we can go to the pond, right? Like they wanted to go skate, and it was like this is just like so hard to try and make happen. So like we
Yeah.
were destined to be a hockey family, but yeah, I mean we and then we got back into it, and it's been a heck of a lot of fun, like from a new perspective, right? Like a new uh just a whole new way to deal with it, right? When you're not doing it yourself.
Yeah, I think again, I'm fairly removed from the game, but from my sense is that it's definitely a healthier environment than it was back in our days in terms of a focus on like mindset, like the stuff you're doing, taking care of your body a lot better. I think the game's more exciting overall than it was in the past, and so those are all like really positive things. And I think also there's more of a focus on balance, which I'm a big proponent of. If you're not playing hockey, you should kind of put that aside and go to the movies or go play lacrosse or basketball or soccer or take a cooking class or do your homework. But a little more balance I think is healthy. So those seem like they're like positive improvements for the game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like totally where you're at, right? Because it can be just as maniacal and crazy, maybe even more so, to be honest. Like at a younger age, like I remember me growing up, and I mean, potentially it was the same experience for you, being such a high draft pick. Like, I mean, I was probably one of, if not the best 13-year-old in Western Canada, and there was no spring hockey. I didn't, I wasn't on the ice every day, like I was playing other sports. Like
Yeah.
it was at that time in our lives, like it was much more balanced. Whereas now these kids are in private hockey leagues and in hockey academies at that age and skating every day and not playing any other sports. And, so I think the holistic development of the athlete is probably a little bit better. Like to your point, like as far as, nutrition, we're mindful of. Kids are doing yoga now, and they're talking about meditation, and mindset is a topic that you can actually discuss, whereas in our day that word probably didn't even exist, right? So as far as that goes, I do think it's a little bit more balanced, but I think it's actually taken maybe a couple steps backwards when it comes to balance of the person, right, or of the athlete, because it seems like it's almost like a 12-month a year thing for these guys now if they want it to be, and at a super young age.
Yeah, well, that shows how far removed I am and the hockey culture down here in North
Right.
Carolina. But I was the same way as you growing up. I was always kind of highly touted. But I took the summers off. Like we would go up to our cottage. We'd play tennis and basketball and swim and water skiing and all that stuff. And once hockey was done, we loved the season when it was going. And when you didn't have a game, you were outside messing around with your buddies, playing road hockey or playing at the local rink. But when hockey season was over, it was on to other things. And I think it served us pretty well back then.
Yeah, for sure. We so I mean, because my kids are of the age that they are, I mean, I've been growing up in the minor hockey environment and coaching in that environment, right? So now I'm starting to see at every level, when kids grow, when they don't, what stars are like young. I mean, maybe sometimes they grow early, or you see these guys grow late, and the late bloomers, and it's kind of been fun to watch it from a different perspective and not like growing up and living in it. I mean, you're a big man, 6'4", 220. Like, were you somebody that grew early, and was that part of your dominance at a younger level?
Yeah, I mean, I was always tall, but I was pretty lanky. I didn't really fill out until probably until we met. I started to put some muscle on. I was always, I was always a guy known as someone having a good work ethic, team player. But there was always, from a very young age, there was a group who were kind of considered the superstars, and they were always the superstars, and they got most of the playing time until we all kind of hit puberty, and then there was a bit of a changing of the guard, as some of the guys who were late bloomers, like you said, they started to get more comfortable in their bodies. Hitting was introduced to the game, which just creates a whole different dynamic. And so, I remember a lot of guys who were the superstars back in Toronto back in the day, none of them that I can recall ever kind of went on to higher levels. And there was a whole new, group came in. And so that's kind of when we were all 14, 15, and 16. And that's when I started to kind of personally recognize that, this was something that, I had a gift, and, it's something, I owed it to myself to take it seriously, and things kind of took off from there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned the body contact, and it's been a discussion in my in my parent group, which I have this parent group on Facebook that's, completely free to join. There's like 1,800 families from across North America. And we, it's just a community that we discuss different topics, and I share mindset stuff in there and whatever. It's just a good community. But we've been talking about the hitting, right, and contact, and when should it be introduced. And it's been more prevalent to me this year because my son graduated into bantam, which is now where you start contact, right?
Yeah.
And for a lot of reasons, I'm like questioning that decision of when they introduce it right now and how they introduce it, as far as from a Hockey Canada standpoint is concerned. Because my goodness, at U15, like, that's 13 and 14-year-olds, and you talk about like the exact time that some kids have grown and some kids haven't. And for instance, my boy Hudson, I think he's 5'5" right now, so not super small, and not really super light either, but he's 118 pounds, but like, so definitely on the lower side of probably both equations. And he has a kid in his team that's 6'2", 190.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's obviously a huge discrepancy, but like, that's what we're talking about, and so we're talking about almost 100 pounds difference in weight. And now, like, this is when they're trying to figure it out. That doesn't necessarily seem like the right solution for me. But how was that? I mean, I would assume that transition for you into hitting was probably a welcome one.
Yeah, no, it worked well for me. I was pretty back in the day. I was pretty mobile. I was pretty fast, and I grew up, watching, the Don Cherry Rock'em Sock'em videos. And so I loved, Wendell Clark was my, hero. And I was always trying to, get the big hit. And so, that was a big part of my game for sure. And then later, as my knees started to deteriorate, and other players got better, it became a big hole in my game, and a pretty big liability actually. So it was interesting how it kind of evolved over time.
Right. What became the liability?
Just my lack of mobility, lack of speed, or deteriorating speed and mobility.
Gotcha.
At the higher levels, you have to kind of anticipate a play, kind of 2 moves ahead of the next guy if you're going to try to line up a good player. And it doesn't happen very often. And if you're a step behind, it's definitely not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, you end up stepping into empty space and not making yourself look very good. Yeah, right. That's for sure. Just one more question on the hitting. Like, do you think, like, I've been trying to like build an idea of what this should look like, and I actually think that the private leagues out here have done a pretty good job with it, and that's at because they separate into age groups, right? Like, you only play with your age, not a year up or not a year down or whatever, that they're able to do that. Part of the structure is that allows them to do that. But what they do is the year before hitting, they have like modified contact. So you're allowed to rub out along the boards. There's no open ice hits. There's no like north-south types hits, but you're allowed to angle. You're allowed to bump. You're definitely allowed to make contact and like hit along the wall. And, and then that you're younger, there's not quite the huge growth discrepancy. I just think that's like an interesting place to start, and maybe even to start that potentially even earlier than that in some type of even modified form, because going from 0 to full on everything seems like it's not probably the best way forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm not a big believer in these kind of 14U classifications or 12U or 10U. That, like you said, it creates huge discrepancies in terms of size and strength and stuff, and that's where kids can get injured. I'm a big fan of the idea of, because it's inevitable. Even that my son, he just turned 11. Kids are bumping into each other. It's inevitable. It's part of the game. And so if you learn at an early age how to protect yourself, I would definitely support that, and penalize people who are kind of out there head hunting and stuff like that. And also, I wouldn't be against seeing full contact pushed out until maybe 15 or a year or two before WHL starts or OHL. So you learn again how to protect yourself, and you have some experience before you get into these leagues with older and bigger and smarter players.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Back to was there an OHL draft when you were stepping in? Had that been introduced already?
Yeah. I was drafted by Oshawa in '94.
Okay, and how did that go? Where was your placement in that draft?
I was fifth overall.
Fifth overall.
Yeah.
So 5th overall, and that's a draw of what? Like that's throughout all of Ontario. Is that where it ends? Is it just Ontario-born players?
No, there were some American players there. I remember as well, because Berard, I believe, was our #1 overall draft pick that
Oh,
year.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Gotcha. So very, very highly picked. So I mean, and the world has changed since that draft, and I'm sure these players now going through it. You mean social media is everywhere, and there's ranking charts, and they know this and they know that. How much did you know that year leading up to your? I guess that'd have been your first year midget, technically. I don't know if those words exist anymore, but
yeah.
was there much pomp and circumstance around it, or were you just playing hockey?
Yeah. I was pretty much just, I was green, innocent, just playing hockey until probably Bantam. And then you start to see that people are looking at you, and you hear whispers, and it's a weird process. It kind of takes on a life of its own. Like one day you're just out there playing hockey, and the next you have to think about where you're going to move to next year with a family, as a billet. So it was strange, but I actually skipped midget after Bantam. I went to junior B, which was a thing in Toronto at the time, and played for Wexford, because they had a strong program, and they had sent a lot of kids to college on scholarships. But I was one of the few that actually opted to go to the OHL because I felt that it was, for me personally, it was probably the best opportunity to get to the NHL faster versus college, and yeah, it worked out pretty well.
Right. Yeah. No, I essentially had the exact same route. I played at 15 for the Panthers here with Paul Correa, right, which is the junior A system, which was if you wanted to get a scholarship, that's where you would go. And then I was eligible to play in the WHL at 16, and that was really my goal and my dream, and that was sort of where the wind was blowing me, right? That probably NHL or pro sooner than later, and that was just a quicker way. And I wouldn't have my draft year in the BCJ, which was tough at the time. You'd rather be in the WHL for that. So yeah, so I opted kind of for the same route as you. So you played the 1 year there, and then hopped into Oshawa. So that would have been because you got drafted in '95. You're showing that would have been in your draft year then. Your rookie year was your draft year.
Yeah, after my rookie year in Oshawa, I was drafted. So that was the '95 draft.
Gotcha.
And I played the '95-'96 year in Oshawa, and then
But with Rexford though, whereas I'm just going to stop you there. So your 16-year-old year, then you opted for junior B. Was that because Oshawa didn't want you there as a 16-year-old? You didn't think you were ready, or how did that work?
oh gosh, I gotta get my go back in time here. It's so long ago. Well, I think I entered at the appropriate age. I wasn't underage, going into Oshawa. It
What
was
is your draft year? Is your 17-year-old year usually, right? So if we got those years right, you would have been drafted. Your draft year in '95 would have been your 17-year-old year because you would have turned 18.
Yeah, but I was definitely drafted by Toronto in '95. So maybe I got the Oshawa draft year wrong.
No, yeah, but did you play as a 16-year-old then, or was your rookie year as a 17-year-old in Oshawa?
I must have been 16. Yeah, I must have been 16. Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't line up. But so your regardless, your draft year was the year that you had 13 points. Is that the one that is that accurate?
With Oshawa, yeah.
Okay, cool. So when you come in as a 5th overall out of the draft, end up going 15th overall in the big draft, in the NHL draft. What was like? How did you identify yourself? Like, what type of player were you, or what type of player were you dubbed to be?
Yeah, big, tough, stay-at-home defenseman, penalty killer. I was always a team captain or a team captain, and so I was always looked at as a leader. And so those were the roles I was really comfortable with and embraced, and something I really kind of strove to kind of emulate and to make it kind of my thing. And
Gotcha.
yeah, so it was it's a process, and I remember after I was drafted, Cliff Fletcher was our GM, and he said, "Listen, if you want to be a stay-at-home, big tough defenseman, you're going to have to go to the minors for a couple of years." And it's just the normal process, and that was fine. That was fine. You can't just show up and think you're going to jump into the NHL and start shutting down superstars. It's a real process, and something I learned to appreciate over time.
Right. That in and of itself, though, I think is a bit of a rarity. Like to go as high as you were in the OHL draft, usually it is the flashy guys, right, or the flashier guys. I don't know if you'd say a higher ceiling or what, but I love that you're saying that, is because like when I'm working with players now in a team environment or vice versa, just on a private basis, like understanding who they are is really a problem a lot of the times, right?
Yeah.
Like like to embrace an identity and to embrace a role and not to limit them in that role, because you can always expand, but just to embrace the fact of like you sitting there saying like I was a stay-at-home defenseman, I took pride in doing that. Like that's harder. That's rarer than you might think to hear somebody want to be that and to enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I never really realized that. It was, I guess it was just something I figured out at a young age, that this is where I fit in to the team, and this is where I'm going to add the most value to the team. I was never a big scorer at all at any level. I was never, a Brian Leach type of defenseman. And I knew that, and I was kind of, pretty honest with myself. And then I knew I could stop guys though, and I was always good at that. And then that became, a source of pride for me. And so I wanted to be known as the guy that you trusted to shut down, the Jason Podollans of the world, putting up huge numbers. And so that was a role like I really cherished.
That is so cool. And yet you said, I mean, one of your biggest attributes was your speed and your mobility. So, being fast and mobile obviously allows you to do that. But I mean, a lot of people reflect back on that time frame, and usually the big shutdown guys weren't fast and mobile, and I think the irony maybe is to your story is that you went from being maybe a new age version of the shutdown defenseman, right, who could skate the puck out and do these things, but then you sort of regressed because of your injuries to somebody that was more atypical of the time, which was a slower, big, try to be shut down defenseman. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, I think that's completely accurate. It was it was a frustrating process to kind of something you would try to nurse and you took pride in, and that was part of your identity. And then while you're still playing, you recognize like, oh my gosh, this isn't who I am anymore. This is the same player. And so you have to try to find out where you are on the team that you're at that particular time, and where you're going to fit in, and where are you going to contribute. And so that's a challenging process for sure.
Well, yeah, and as you know, what I'm doing now, and I mean, I use the word mindset, and I think that encompasses, so many different dynamics. It's a pretty big word, but man, like the mindset of that. I mean, you're talking about self-awareness there that a lot of guys don't have, and when you recognize the self-awareness and you're looking in the mirror and seeing that, now you have to do something about it, right? Like, how are you going to deal with that? Does your ego allow yourself to deal with that? And how are you going to make yourself relevant? Can you maybe share anything about that? Because I know that you're obviously an intelligent guy, and I remember that from even playing with you. Well spoken, thoughtful. Like that must have been a lot of discussions going on internally for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think I had my first knee surgery. Again, if my math is right, which hasn't been too sharp so far today, but it was right before my first year in St. John's, and the Leafs doctor, he worked on me. It was a meniscus tear. Didn't seem like a big deal, and he said, you'd be fine for the rest of your career. So I never really put much thought into it, but pretty quickly into the first season, it was bothering me a lot. And I recognized I was kind of a half step slower than I was, and there was a lot of swelling some days, and I was in and out of the lineup occasionally, and so that was challenging for me, especially you're on a new team, you're trying to prove yourself, you're with older players who have been around the block, and to be kind of the first round kid who's maybe he's hurt, but he never really had a specific incident, and so maybe he just doesn't really want to play. So that was a process for me, especially because like we talked about, I kind of prided myself on being a team guy. So it was a searching process. It made me sensitive at times to criticism, because I felt vulnerable about that this again, my identity was changing, and where am I going to fit in? And so it wasn't a lot of fun, to be honest, but it was it was important to do, and you had to be honest with yourself, and again, try to figure out where you're gonna where, if you really are a team player, where you got to figure out where you're going to contribute to the team the best way you can. And so that was the process.
We're talking at 20 years old too, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, that kind of stuff actually blows my mind, because there's so much going on, right? There's so much going on a personal level, and I remember my experience out there. I mean, I had so much going on. You had so much going on, right? And I don't know what you remember, but there was not one person talking to me about any of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Newfoundland it has a lot of virtues. Amazing people, so nice, pretty, but it's very isolated, and there's not a lot to do except kind of sit around and kind of think about what's going right, or sometimes what's going wrong, and that can create a pretty negative feedback loop, which isn't healthy at all.
Right. Well, and that, to my point, right? So yeah, so I mean, if you're somebody that internalizes something, right, and you decide not to go out and go to the bar, let's say, and have some beers, which was what I decided to do half the time when I didn't know what to do with myself, right? Like, we'd go meet some people or whatever, take your mind off things. You can get into some bad habits on both sides of that coin. But I guess my point is here's a first round pick from Toronto that's just had surgery, that you're going through all this stuff that you're noticing and trying to deal with and get in the lineup. And who talked to you about it from Toronto?
So I hope the situation in Toronto has changed. And again, I'm far removed, so I don't know. But it wasn't a great environment for bringing up young players, to put it gently. there wasn't a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of feedback. And because you were isolated, there was just no sense of visibility. You kind of felt like you were getting lost in the shuffle a little bit. In hindsight, I think that was a mistake, to be honest. I mean, there was some truth to it for sure, but I think over time, and after I've stepped away from the game for a number of years, I kind of realized that there is a lot of things out of your control, but if you spend your time dwelling on that, it's no good. You just have to focus on the things that are in your control, and part of that is just showing up with a good attitude, even if you have to fake it, and sometimes you do. But show up, have a good attitude, and I think if you keep doing that over time, that someone's going to notice. Whether in St. John's or you're in Toronto or Brandon, Alberta, or New York, I think if you keep showing up, you keep trying, you try not to beat up on yourself or complain about the situation, that eventually someone's going to recognize it and hopefully give you a shot. And maybe I'm looking at things with rosy colored glasses now that I'm 20 plus years out of the game, but when I zoom back into that moment, it was a difficult time.
Quick break from the episode here to remind you all things Up My Hockey. Up My Hockey is your home for holistic development. If you're looking for player development and you're looking for it to do it in a style that is new age and is thoughtful and is progressive, then developing the person behind the player is the way to go. To give your player the mindset tools. As Jeff so eloquently says in this episode, you get provided with tools and strategies to empower yourself, that you can make different decisions in the moments that are going to be beneficial and that aren't going to be harming you because you don't know the difference. It's so crazy that these things aren't really taught in school. It's crazy that they're not taught elsewhere in sports and in environments that you're at, when they're such an integral part of performance, development, peak potential. So that is what Up My Hockey is. It's unpacking the athlete and providing a holistic development approach to being your best. And what I do really love about what I do is that not only do I do help hockey players be better at what they love, which is hockey, but the byproduct of the work that we do together, whether inside my programs or whether it's personally one-on-one or in a group or team environment, is that the individuals are better able to prosper at life in their own relationships away from the rink, in school, in their work, with their families, in relationships. This is the gift and a skill that just keeps on giving. So, yes, that's Up My Hockey. It's at upmyhockey.com. Leadership development, culture development, mindset development, physical skill development, changing your paradigms and your perceptions about what that means and how to execute better. Like there's so much inside what Up My Hockey is. I'm really proud of the company and the brand that it's becoming. And if you want to know more about what it looks like to work with me, whether you have a team, an association, an academy, or just a hockey playing son or daughter, you can look at upmyhockey.com to find that out. Now back to my interview with Jeff Ware. What I teach players now is like the empowerment of the moment, like for sure. Like in every moment, there is some opportunity, right? And sometimes we need some help to find that, and some direction on what to focus on when we get to the rink to make that a reality. So I'm definitely not a victim player. There are circumstances and there is situations where there's things that you can't control, as you're saying. But I'm just only bringing that up just for the listeners here, right? Like just to and not even to point fingers at Toronto, because I'm sure Toronto was probably one of 28 other teams that was behaving very similarly back at those days. But It was a very isolating experience, and there was no support available. Not to our recognition anyways. And it didn't seem like they were very engaged in giving that, like, and whether even they knew what support was, right? Like, I think it was 20 years ago, but like to have you again, to use your scenario that you've just gone through this surgery, like there's a lot going on with that in and of itself, right? To recover from a surgery, to be now in a new place, in a new team, like you said, trying to fit in with your peers, trying to earn their respect, trying to find your way on the ice. Like all this stuff. Like, can you imagine if Billy Waters came up every couple of weeks? Where's you? How's it going, man? Like, what's up with your knee? This is where we see you at. And this is kind of our pipeline. Are you feeling all right? Like those types of discussions probably would have made a world of difference and could have been very helpful. Yet you at 20 were left there trying to figure all that stuff out on your own.
Yeah, no, that's all true, and undeniable for sure. I think I talk to Bill Waters maybe once a year, and I do distinctly remember, and I don't know if you recall this or not, but I do distinctly remember that there was a big emphasis on, whether we win or lose, we're going to win the fights. So there was a big push, and in my case, it was explicit on many occasions that like you're going to go out and you're going to take care of business, and that was another challenge, because that wasn't who I was. It came, naturally in the game, spontaneously. As a big, physical defenseman, you're going to get into fights once in a while, but this was a different style. This was kind of, spending all week sitting around thinking about who you're going to take on Friday night, which, it's a lot of pressure on a young kid back then. So to have someone to talk to just events, or to have someone listen to you, that would have done incredible wonders, I think. And actually, after my episode with St. John's, I engaged with a sports psychologist, and it was incredible. My confidence was shattered after St. John's, and it took me a couple years to build it back up, but it was amazing, because they just by listening and making some suggestions, they give you the tools to help yourself,
right?
Fix your mindset. They can't tell you what's right or wrong or what happened. That was, good luck or bad luck or whatever. They help you develop the tools to help yourself. And so, if anyone, if there's any stigma around seeing a sports psychologist, I couldn't disagree more with that. I think it's great for any player who needs to talk about things.
Yeah. No, fantastic. I love that share. What a great share, and way to be brave enough to be able to do it, because at the time there was a stigma about like one, and there still is that stigma, not necessarily about the profession of sports psychology. Like I think that that's kind of gone by the wayside. Like there's massive value there, and I completely respect the people that do it. But for an athlete in that moment, being a pro athlete, to hold up your hand uh, and say, "There's something not right here," I got to go see something, right? Like that's the narrative that I think sucks. Because why do you have to be broken to go see a sports psychologist? And that's what I say with guys that are working with me, right? Like you might not have confidence, things might not be going well, like, and I will obviously love to get you through that and over that, but like you should be seeking people like me out or a sports psychologist out when things are going good.
Yeah, I agree.
Like prepare for the storm before the storm happens, or even how can you fine tune what you're doing well now to get even more out of yourself, right? Like it should be looked at as a high performance tool, not as like a way to recover from something horrific. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like that people wait that long either, but I'm so thankful that you did and you got it and you have a great story to share for it. What was that process like for you? Like to get to that point where you wanted to pick up the phone and say, hey, like I want to make an appointment.
Yeah, it was, you know, so after my first year in Toronto, again, I don't want to kind of rehash all the dirty, laundry, but I basically, I felt like things weren't going the right direction with the organization. So I asked for a trade, very quietly, and they just flat out said no and didn't really give a reason. There was a new management change or new management in Toronto at the time. It was, Mike Smith and whole different regime. And so, I was kind of trying to figure out a strategy with my agent, and he suggested, I kind of proactively, get yourself traded, figure out how to do that, make yourself, kind of unwanted. And so I did, I went and picked fights with the coach, and I did some things that, in hindsight, I wish I hadn't done. And, and then they did trade me. And so after I left that, there was like a sense of shame that I had kind of taken that route. And, even though it was successful in our ultimate goal, it was just not the person I wanted to be. And so, after Toronto, I felt like, it's time for me to take ownership over my career. My agent can't do this for me. My dad can't do it for me. My old coaches can't do it for me. Like I have to do it. And so, again, it's kind of looking in the mirror, being honest and saying like, what do I need right now? I need to talk to someone who's objective and has no, axe to grind. He's not political, like someone who's just going to kind of listen and hear me out. And then just the process of talking, you start to figure things out yourself. You start to see things from different angles and a different light. And then, you figure it out and you start to heal a little bit.
Yeah, that's totally it, and that's the thing. As far as like my placement too, like which I think is relevant because like I did mention sports psychology. I am not a sports psychologist, like so. If I just want to make sure that there's that line there, like, and I have immense respect for them that have done the academia required to do all that, and they're super. I've talked to a lot of guys that have benefited from them, but I think there's why people like me exist is because there's a lack of trust by some athletes that like, what does this person really know? They've never been there, like what am I telling them for, and so I think where someone like me comes in who doesn't have letters after my name but has been in the same dressing rooms you've been in, right, and tried to do the same things that you tried to do, and did some things really well and failed in other aspects, right, that we have this breadth of experience, first person, first world experience that helps, right, and we can speak the same language and speak the same talk, so it becomes a bit more approachable and a bit more familiar, right, like to be able to make that call, right, or to be able to say, hey, I'd like to talk to somebody, because I know for me personally, that was one thing that was available at the time. Like, I mean, I know Florida had a sports psychologist that like they introduced us to. Toronto also did, but it wasn't like the introduction felt to me like, yeah, like I would have leprosy if I picked up that phone. You know what I mean? Like there was no way I was going to do this. That was just like, that was me telling them that I couldn't handle something. Right. So anyways, I think it's more approachable now. I think the space is more approachable, but like as eloquent as you are with it in your own experience, like everything you're talking about there, like, yes, there's on ice components to it, but it's not the athlete, it's the person that's dealing with it, right?
Yeah.
It's the person that's dealing with it, and so much of the focus was on, on the physical asset of the hockey player, and that everything else was just forgotten about. And it's starting to come to light now that without what's going on between your ears connected to, your hands and your feet, right, to give yourself the best opportunity in the moment, like, it's just not going to work. So have you found that some of that stuff that the sports psychologists that you worked with them on is applicable to life and job and being a dad and a husband?
Oh, it changed my life for sure. You after going through what you and I went through within hockey, and then taking the time to reflect on it, objectively and thoughtfully, recognizing where you made mistakes and recognize areas where you had a bad hand and things just didn't work out for whatever reason. It gives you a lot of strength, and you feel like you can go into any situation, and you kind of feel like you're the toughest person in the room. And I don't mean you can knock someone out. It means you feel like you can take on anything. And so whether it's a challenge with your job, or an issue with your wife or your husband or whatever, your kids, your neighbors, whatever it is, you still have those impulses where you have anger or you react a certain way, but it kind of helps you to kind of take a step back and think about, oh, when have I been in this situation before? What's worked? What doesn't? What's really my goal here? And it just helps you to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful about the whole process. So it's been amazing. I would definitely encourage it for anyone who needs it.
Yeah, right. And I assume you saying that you would have, like, engaged with somebody prior to the time you did, like, whenever that would have been. But to have somebody on your side or at your shoulder that wasn't mom or dad or an agent to help you navigate that space, I'm sure you would have found valuable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, we were babies back then. We were barely young men, and we were just learning about the world. We were just learning about our bodies, the opposite sex, drinking. You had all these pressures. Thank God we didn't have social media at the time, because that would have added a whole new element. And then you're shipped off to a different city. You're living with a strange family. Not that they're not nice, but it's a lot for a young kid. And so to have a third party who's objective, who will just kind of listen to you with no judgment, that I think that'd be a great thing. And if I'd had that earlier, who knows, maybe it wouldn't have helped my knee, but maybe I could have handled like the kind of the downfall a little bit better.
Yeah, well, exactly. Navigate the space. I mean, and how that environment affects you, personally, is huge. And I think, yeah, there's so much going on there for all of us between the years. And one of the things I was just thinking, like, physical is a huge component of that, like your physical ability to do something. When people are coming back from injury or the body's degenerating as you move on in your career, sometimes it gets the process is quickened for different circumstances. Like, that's a whole issue. And then you have, like, the ability of, like, your EQ, right? Like, your emotional quotient, not only with yourself, but, like, with your teammates and with the coaching staff. Like, that was something, like when I look back on my history, like, for some reason I had this, like, chip on my shoulder with coaching staff or with management, like, but I wanted the boys to love me, right? That was my dichotomy, right? Like, I wanted to be one of the boys in the room. I wanted to have the respect of the group, but I didn't want to feel like I was putting on airs for a coach or for whoever, right? And I think that approach, I was totally missing the boat, because that's all anything is connections, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
coaches need to be in love with you, right? Because they make a huge difference, right? If there's any reason for a coach not to like you, or for anyone in that organization not to like you, you're not doing yourself any favors. So, like, fostering those connections and understanding that, and even that, right? Like, who teaches that right now?
Yeah, it's experience. Again, reflecting on what's working, what's not.
Right.
I started to do it more in like the last few years of my career. I was with Syracuse, and I'd figured it out by then that I need to. I started to put myself in the shoes of the coach, and like, how does he see me? Like, how am I going to help him achieve his goals? And so I would just go and sit in his office, and I would and talk to him. I'd say, just find out what's going on with with so and so. What does he think of me? We got this game coming up. How do you see it playing out? Who's going up? Who's coming down? How are we going to win this thing together? How are we going to help each other? And so that was a lot of fun. It wasn't a way to like ingratiate myself. It was kind of like I was genuinely interested in helping the team win, and then just all these good things happened, and like it just flowed out of it, and you felt more engaged. You felt like more like a a leader on the team, and that was a lot of fun to do that. So, but yeah, no, in terms of the mental game, it's everything. It's everything.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear what you said earlier about people paying more attention to the sleep and nutrition and the training, and I'm sure it's much more advanced than anything we did. But the real secret there is the mindset, and that everything flows out of that. And if you're not in the right headspace, you're going to have doubts, you're going to have hesitancy. You're going to be tempted to make shortcuts. You may be sensitive to criticism. You may have a chip on your shoulder with some particular person who's really important to you, and you might not know it. So it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, no, it totally is. I love the way you were, like how you phrased that. I mean, you weren't doing it for personal gain, and that's the thing. So like I bring it up in that way because when you're speaking to an athlete, like they need to know, or they want to know, like, how is this going to help me, right?
Yeah.
So like, that happens after you're authentic and you understand the importance of what it is that you're doing, right? That you're not changing who you are. Like, and that was the thing with me. People seem to like me, like when I talk with them. I tend not to make people mad. I know there's people probably lining up right now with their hands up saying, "You liar, I hate you." But for the most part, like, it seems like that's good. So like, if I would have just been myself, authentically me, and allowed myself to be open and available, and be interested and curious like I am naturally, right? Like, these things would have flown and happened. But if you get inward and you get internal and you have these different ideas and you don't know why you're doing them anyways, then you get hurt at the end of the day, right? So just being yourself and being a good human being and understanding that this not only is just the way to be, it's also a way to get what you want better, quicker, faster, right? Like, they just go hand in hand. So yeah, I mean, if you ever come across as inauthentic and you're trying to contrive relationships to better yourself, like, that's not going to work, and that's not going to fly, and people are going to see through that, and you're going to be annoying, and you're not going to last very long, right? But of all the guys that I've seen that have done well, that are still involved in the game, they were guys that were just themselves, and they had a great time in the locker room, and they made connections, and those connections are now still connections, and that's the way the world works. So there's so many different dynamics to anything, whether it be high achieving in a lawyer's office or a doctor's office or anywhere, right, on Wall Street. I just think it's interesting because all of these things we're talking about, are personal development scenarios that allow you to be better. And,
no, it's all about people. It's all about people, and everyone has their inadequacies and their the stories going through their heads. But I think if you pick your spots. You don't show up in the coach's office every day looking to chat, but if there's something to say, feel free to go say it. And I think if a coach is worth his salt, we'll appreciate that. And it's a real dialogue. And then, like, to your point, it applies to everything in life. It's all about relationships. So if you approach it honestly and authentically, then 9 times out of 10 you'll get a good response, I think.
Yeah. Well, how many surgeries did you end up having before you called it a day?
So I had 4 while I was playing, pretty much one every year, and then I had 1 after I finally called it quits.
All on the knees?
All on the right knee. Yeah.
Jeepers.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, one of the ironies of it all was that it was kind of like a slow burn. It would just kind of slowly deteriorate over time. And so I knew the writing was on the wall. And, ironically, I started to appreciate the last couple of years a little bit more. And so that was kind of interesting. And then it made the retirement easier too, because I knew, like, I had nothing else to give. Like, I could barely walk after a bus ride. I was I would wait until everyone left, and then I would kind of sneak off so no one would see me. So at the end, it was kind of easy because there was no other way to go. It wasn't like I was just opting not to play anymore. There wasn't a choice, and so ironically, that was a good thing. I was still relatively young. I was in the early 20s, so I could kind of make a transition into something else. And
Right.
so one door closes, so another one opens, and you got take advantage of those.
Right. And I know my ego had a lot to do with like me leaving, or you have those questions, being this child star and all this, these projections that you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and I ended up playing 41 NHL games, and in the intro to this podcast, I thought I was going to play 1,000, and that was really, I mean, the truth of it, right? And there is a ego side of that when you're looking back to be like, what the f happened, or like how did I fail, or where did I go wrong, like that was part of it for me, like at 30s. And I think with you, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like being from Ontario, being a Toronto first round pick, and then like to walk into your first year pro, to have your first surgery, and to really never be who you were supposed to be, even physically, um, like was that hard, like answering those questions, or being deemed a bad pick or a failure or whatever would have come across your way?
Oh yeah, no, I've heard it all. Worst pick in Leaf history. Terrible player. I've heard it all. Yeah, it was. Yeah, no way to get around it. It was definitely hard. I mean, that stuff, those kind of criticisms, and they burn you like temporarily. But the real kind of disappointment came from just not achieving what, like you said, and what you would set yourself out to achieve. And it's really a part of your personality. You're this young guy coming up with all the promise in the world. You're going to be a career NHL player. You're going to have a ton of fun, maybe win the cup one year, make a lot of money, and just like didn't even come close. And so I still deal with that today, but I'm a lot better with it than I was. But the first couple of years, I kind of dove into school and put all that energy into finishing my undergrad. But it was actually after that, when school was over and I had to go out and find a real job, that it started to sink in, and I had a dark period. And I was drinking too much, and in a bad headspace, and then just started to work on that, and over time you climb back out of it. And yeah, am I still sensitive about it sometimes on a day when I'm tired, or I'm in a bad mood? For sure, I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But again, you try to focus on the good things that came out of it.
Well, yeah, man. Like, which actually maybe we can shift gears, because the I mean, and it gets so crazy. I didn't even realize how many parallels that we had, right? So I totally feel what you're saying there. First of all, like like there's definitely aspects of trades that I was involved with, or picks that I was done, or you hear this, you hear that, and you deal with it and you move on the best you can. But I can totally get what you're saying there, right? That it stays with you, right? And depends where it shows up, or where it comes up, or how it comes up, right? Of how often or how real it is. But I do think the work that I've done personally, and it sounds like that you've done personally, like I'm almost thankful for all the really shitty stuff, that maybe we're talking about. Like that's actually where the juice really is.
Yeah.
Like that's where you find out, and that's where you figure it out, and that's where you gain this resolve, and really this own personal self belief that I got this, and I can do whatever the hell I want, because of that. So I don't know if you feel that, but that's one of the things I'm talking with players now. I'm like, you know what? Like, it doesn't feel like it right now, but when we get through this, and you will get through this, like, you're going to be so thankful for this moment right now, because
Yeah.
without it, you're not going to understand who you are and what you could be. So for anyone out there dealing with some shit right now, like if you're listening to this and things aren't going your way, like really, like listen to Waresy, like whatever you can do to find your like fill that glass half up, see the silver lining, find an opportunity in that moment, and just keep fighting through, because once you get out of it, it's like you look back and you're so proud. So I am proud of the crap that we went through, and I'm sure you are as well. Could it have gone better, differently, more acclaim, more celebrity status. Yeah, sure, but hey, that's not the way it goes all the time, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like the low points in retrospect are the high points now, because you you go through it, you grind through it, and you come out stronger. And just you keep building on all those defeats, and you build up that shield, that kind of superpower. And I feel the same way as Like I'm confident, couldn't be happier. I know I can deal with a lot, and I look around, and especially in the world today when people are so sensitive about so many different things, like it's kind of like water off a duck's back. So
Yeah.
it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you have the same something. You have the same sentiment to me with all this stuff that's going on in the headlines, and you're hurting people's feelings all over the place. And not to discount anyone's feelings, right?
Yeah.
It's like the stuff that we went through. Like you can't really describe it until you've done it, right? And so everything just sort of seems easy breezy now in this day and age. Just a quick break from my conversation with Jeff, too. Thank you again. I always like to thank everybody listening. I think that that's super important because you are what this is all about. All of you, I'm getting a lot more shout outs too online with the DMs. Really appreciate that. I do appreciate the suggestions for guests. I just got connected with an old hockey friend who used to play with the Vipers with Michigan State head coach Adam Nightingale. So I think Adam Nightingale is going to be a future guest. And there's been other people that have been reaching out and say, hey, you should interview this guy. I have a connection here. I have a connection there. That is so amazing, and that is so helpful for me in the pursuit of guests and high quality guests that are people that I think have stories that are worth sharing and people worth listening to. So by all means, keep those coming. Like I really do appreciate the support when it comes to searching for guests, interviews that you found amazing, ideas, concepts covered that you thought were great. The reviews that come in that, oh geez, I'm supposed to be reading one right now. Actually, totally forgot to do that. I don't have one ready, so we'll skip that. But keep those reviews coming in. The 5-star reviews are fantastic. You're sharing on social. You're sharing amongst your friends. All of this is really creating the Up My Hockey community and what it's all about, bringing people together. So thank you again for listening once again, and we'll get back to this interesting conversation with Jeff Ware. Thanks again. Let's talk about that whole World Junior, which was awesome. And so this was kind of when the glory days were happening, right? I mean, 5th overall pick, and then you're playing junior, and your knee's good, and you're feeling healthy, and now you're representing Canada. Was that one of the highlights for you, winning that World Junior gold medal and playing for Mike Babcock?
Yeah, it was. What a year. That definitely was the highlight year. So I made Toronto out of the camp that year and played a handful of games with them. Then they sent me to try out for World Juniors, and I was, fortunate enough to make the team. And then after World Juniors, I went back to Oshawa, and we won the OHL Championship. So,
oh wow!
So it was a big year for me. But yeah, World Juniors, in retrospect, probably maybe the highlight of it all. I mean, to have that opportunity to play for your country, represent your country, and then to go ahead and win under an amazing coach with incredible teammates, world-class program. It was just what a dream come true. It was just unbelievable and so much fun. And of all the challenges I had in some of the memories with hockey, that some were not as great as others, through and through, consistently World Juniors is just the best experience ever. It was so fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What do you think of Mike Babcock? There's kind of an interesting discussion there because you had the chance to play for him there. He did go on to, for all my Toronto Maple Leaf fans that are listeners, you also didn't get a chance to play for him under the Maple Leaf logo. I played for him as the Spokane Chief for 2 years in the day. And he kind of left, obviously, Toronto on not the best of terms. What did you see in playing for him then that you liked or didn't like?
Yeah, so we did not have the best team at the tournament that year in World Juniors at all. We had some amazing individual players who went on to have fantastic careers, like Danny Briere, Joe Thornton was an underage for us. 2 great goalies, Marty Biron, Sebastian, who was it? Marty Biron and I forget the other one. And in any case, Boyd Devereaux, Al McCauley. So some fantastic players. but we didn't have a superstar team like the year before, and so I think the thing that Mike Babcock impressed me with was he recognized that we weren't going to win by trying to outgun the Russians or some of the other teams like that. Our kind of bread and butter was going to be Canadian style hockey. We're going to play really disciplined hockey. We're going to play physical hockey, and we're going to use the depth of our lineup. And so everyone was expected to do the same thing. Everyone was back checking. Everyone was sacrificing their body, and everyone was expected to chip in a goal if there was the opportunity, and the opportunity presented itself. And so I thought that was amazing. And he kind of engaged in a lot of team building exercises. He would talk to players individually. I know he and I talked individually a few times during the tournament about specific plays, stuff that no one else saw or no one else would have paid attention to. But he'd pull you aside and say, what happened here, or what were you thinking there? And I don't know what happened with him in Toronto. I didn't follow it, but from my experience, it was world class.
Yeah, he was always super prepared for sure. That's one thing, and he was really intense, right? Like he took what he did seriously, and I think that he had not that other coaches don't, but he was one of the only first and few coaches that I had that was like, he seemed to me to be what an NHL coach should be.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that, right? Like, but
yeah.
He was just works and stuff, and like for sure he his cynicism, and he there was an arrogance a bit to him, but like as far as like from a hockey standpoint, like I thought that he knew his stuff. I knew that he was intense. You kind of knew what you were going to get with him, and he understood the game really well. Like there's lots of things I could say that were definitely very positive about Babs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. He he had this kind of two sides to him where you felt like, at least personally, I felt like I could go up and talk to him about something, but you knew you couldn't hang around too long and waste his time. Like, to your point, it was business. We're all here to win. That was the goal. And so what are you doing? Like, how are you pulling the ship forward with the rest of us to help us win? And I appreciated that. Like, we were all there to win. So it was great for the period that you're together for World Juniors. Would it be the right approach over the course of a season? I don't know. I'm not a coach, but it worked wonders in our scenario.
That's awesome. You got to play with Danny. I still keep in touch with Danny. What a great human being he is. Assistant GM now in Philadelphia and a phenomenal hockey player. And I was so thankful that he actually, I don't know if you know his story with that, but I think he tried out 3 times before the time he made it. Like I think he was asked as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and then he finally made it as a 19-year-old. So the fact that he got to play and won his gold medal, I thought was great because I think he deserved it probably even before he got it there. But what a year though, dude! Like holy smokes, making Toronto out of camp, and then winning the OHL Championship, gold medal. Like how is that whole? I guess you says it shows you played 12 games there, 13 games for Toronto, so that would have been all at the start of the year. Did you ever get to a spot where they said to get a place, or were you living in a hotel the whole time during that period?
No, I was living with my parents. I'm born and raised in Toronto, so we didn't live that far from Maple Leaf Gardens, and so in retrospect, it's hysterical. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, yeah, this is great. And so I would have guys like who lived close to us, guys like Larry Murphy, like picking me up to drive me to practice and stuff, which is just so surreal and bizarre.
Right.
But so I played 13 games with them. I think that at the beginning of the season, I was in and out of the lineup.
How did it go? How did it go? How would you describe those 13 games?
I thought I was happy with the way I played, to be honest. Obviously, it's a whole different level of intensity and professionalism, but I felt comfortable, to be honest. And they told me they wanted me to have more ice time, which I totally got from a development perspective, and so they said this is the game plan. You're going to play World Juniors if you make the team. Go back to Oshawa, play a lot of hockey, and then come back to camp next year, and we'll see how it goes. And maybe you'll be more permanent here. And so that made a lot of sense. That was under Cliff Fletcher, and so what a year! What can you say? It was unbelievable.
That is wild. Yeah, because we have that connection too. I mean, Cliff was the one who traded for me, right? And then Cliff got fired that year. I don't know if I was a part of that firing or not, but yeah, I mean, I got traded at the deadline. 2 months later, he was gone. Then Mike Smith came in, and that was a whole different ball. And it would have been for you too, because
Yeah.
I mean, you were a Cliff Fletcher draft pick, and I was a Cliff Fletcher trade, and Mike Smith didn't seem to want to have much to do with anything that was a part of that era, and made it quite known. So that was an interesting environment for you and I to be trying to play in. Reflecting on that team, where is he? Like those two teams, like it's so funny because in on my platform and when I'm sharing stuff on social or discussions that I choose to have, like one of the ones recently has been about like the puzzle pieces of like putting together an NHL roster, right? Uh, and how it's not necessarily the best players that actually go to the NHL, right? Like it's different guys, it's different pieces, and I think like our time in St. John's might be like a totally perfect example of that. Like, because when I think of the best players that I play with in St. John's, the two names that come to mind for me are Lonnie Bahanas and Brandon Comrie.
Yep, I agree.
Both of who had very limited, inconsequential NHL careers.
Yeah.
And then we have Sean Thornton, Kevin Adams, and Nathan Dempsey, I think, were the three then that probably played the most games. And taking nothing away from the Sean, Thornton, he's been a guest on here, and I mean he's 2 cups and had an amazing career, and and Demmer too. Like what an amazing conversation that was. For those of you listening right now who didn't listen to the Nathan Dempsey interview, like holy smokes, God. Almost brings a tear to my eye right now, but like what he made of himself at from 25 on, the career that he had, and Adzi too, right? GM now of the Buffalo Sabres, but like I wouldn't have considered them the best players there, in any capacity, right? Like, but Adzi found his mark, in what he did well. He played a 3rd line, 4th line role as pretty much his whole career. Demmer stepped in and like filled those minutes that you could as a 5 or 6 guy. In an unconventional way, because he wasn't a big physical guy, but he was able to eat minutes and penalty kill and grow his game. And then Thordy just stepped in and actually improved as a player along the way so much, that like it made himself relevant. Yet where's Lonnie Bahanas and where's Brandon Comrie? So like, is that your kind of memory of that as well? Like that, that you maybe thought should go on, didn't, and others did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd never seen anyone shoot the puck like Lonnie Bahanas, and Convery was just lightning fast and an epic goal scorer. But yeah, I don't know the specifics of their circumstances, but I spent more time with Thornton, Kevin Adams, and Nathan, and the thing that's consistent across all their stories is just like that work ethic, and I think specifically about Kevin Adams and finding where you fit, back to our earlier topic, he came out of college, he was a prolific goal scorer, and he came to St. John's. We had great guys who, could put the puck in the net, better than he could at that time. And so he found his role, as like you said, the 3rd, 4th line kind of centerman, penalty killer, utility man. Nathan was the same way. He could kill penalties. He could quarterback a power play. He'd always make that first great pass. Thordy, I played against Thordy in the OHL, and I think he came to hockey relatively late, and he was still learning to skate in the OHL, but he would always show up. Like you knew if Sean's playing, like you're probably gonna have to fight him, and he might lose or you might lose, but he's gonna show up, and like you said, he kept showing up every day and working on his skills and getting better and making himself effective and finding out where he fits in and how is he going to help the team. And so those guys are really inspirational to they should be to all hockey players in terms of figuring out where you fit and having the work ethic and just sticking with it. And kudos to them. They had fantastic careers.
Yeah, no kidding. And I forgot about Smitty. Like his playing career wasn't that great, but then there's Smitty, an NHL head coach now, DJ, right? Like that's actually nuts. Those guys, and we have a GM and a head coach from that team that are now still very, very involved in the NHL. Pretty wild stuff. And then Diesel too. Like Diesel was a guest on the program too. Him losing his eye. It just shows. I mean, even me. Like I led the AHL in goals that year when I was there with you. Like.
Did you really?
At 21 years old. Like at 42 before I got traded and scored 5 when I left for the I. Almost had 50 goals there. And like, I don't know, right? It's like, what do you, and that's the thing for me. It was like, you knew what you were supposed to be or what they wanted you to be. And I wasn't sure what, like, looking back now is like, I could have penalty killed for them if they wanted me to. You know what I mean? Like I was fast enough and physical enough and big enough to just run around and hit guys if they wanted me to. But like that communication of like, this is what we want from you, right? It's very hard to obviously go from an AHL goal scorer to be now an NHL goal scorer. You know, like you're taking, you know, whose spot are you taking? You're taking Sergei Berezan's spot, or you're taking whoever's, right? Like, so that's a pretty tough transition. And usually you have to find a way in, which would be, you know, in a lower role and being able to PK or do whatever, like a Kevin Adams style. But if it's never asked of you, I mean, it's hard to think that you're supposed to do that too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You know what
but
I mean?
you know, I do think about your circumstances. You could do it all. Like I didn't realize you put up those types of numbers, but I knew you were, you know, lethal around the net. You were always tough. Like I wouldn't want to mess with you if I was, you know, playing against you. And you were fast, so you could, you know, as long as you were committed to it, you could, you know, kill penalties as well. And so that's, you know, having that kind of balance and that kind of dynamism across the different, you know, facets of the game. It's pretty rare. How do you bring that forward? I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
That's a tougher question for sure.
Yeah.
But again, communication. You know, if you can figure out a way to, you know, put your hand up at the right time, if the opportunity presents itself, you know, put your hand up, and what's the worst that can happen? They say no.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And Kevin Adams, actually, I mean, if I won't remember obviously verbatim, but in Toronto, so in the same environment we were in, but he had a very different experience. Like Mike Milbury took him aside, he said, at the one camp or whatever the scenario was, and like pointed out Matt Sundin and whoever else was on the ice at the time, and he was like, "Do you think you're going to take his spot?" You know, and he was like, "No," you know, and he's like, "Well, like, anyways, it was a nice way of him saying, like, you work on your face-offs, work on the things that are going to allow you to get into the league, right? Because you're not going to take his role, you know, like this isn't going to be for you." And Adzi, I mean, credit to him because that's totally who he is, right? Like, give me a job and I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like he owned it. Like he went and worked on face-offs and he worked in his PK and like, you know, and he not necessarily forgot about his offensive instincts, but that was what he was okay doing that. Right. And that's amazing. Right. And a lot of guys aren't willing to make those commitments. But at least someone told him to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's nice too. Right. Okay. Now I have a job. Now I have a role. And I think for athletes or anyone in anything, right, any type of business at all, just tell me what the expectations are and what the roles are, and then I can step into it and knock it out of the park, hopefully, right? Like that's a good thing. So I do like that with hockey now. It does seem like the communication level is much higher, which is good, right? Because you can only do so much trying to figure it out on your own all the time, and I think that was kind of where we were stuck with it most of the time. But good times there, man. Like totally good times. I have Danny Markov is on my hit list. He says apparently he's getting divorced right now, and he needs some time before he's going to come on as a guest. But it's not going to be a riot. You're gonna have to tune back in for Danny Markov. Give me your best Danny Markov story. Do you remember any?
Probably not. I want to repeat. Well, I mean, talk about a gritty guy. Danny was always, you know, super gritty. You know, even in practice, he'd drive you nuts because he'd be going, you know, 1,000% and trying to take your head off. So,
and so, while smelling like cigarettes and booze at the same time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
That guy lived the way he played. Like that's one of those guys that I would say, like, that's how you did best describe him. If anyone is a hockey fan and was a Toronto Maple Leafs fan and you watched Danny Markov play hockey, because like, what was he, 165 pounds soaking wet? Like,
he was tiny.
And he would just throw his body at shots, at people, at anything, right? Like just relentless out there. You'd have to shoot him to stop him. And that was what he was like off the ice too. Exactly the same way, I think.
Yeah, he was wild. You know, he's missing teeth and he was out all night and then would show up and, you know, go dive head first through the boards. Like no problem.
No problem.
There were some characters back then. It was a different world. That was like old school slap shot type of hockey back then. It was a wild world. And I tell people some of the stories, the stuff that happened, they don't believe me because they can't believe that stuff like that actually happened.
Were you there for that bar brawl in on that Newfoundland trip, that exhibition trip? Were you there then?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, so you might have been up with me. I just missed it. Like I was in Toronto still at the time,
Jeez.
and Danny was back, and Thordy was there, and Bird Dog was there.
I remember hearing about that. That was right after training camp, I think.
Yeah, it was right after training camp. They were on that exhibition series through the Rock and all those little towns.
Gander or something.
So, anyways, well, I won't get you to, because I wasn't there. I wanted to hear your version of it, but that's supposed to be one of the all-time Danny Markov, like starting things off stories, like that turns into like a slap shot style bar brawl. Oh my gosh!
Thank God I wasn't there.
No kidding.
Like, nothing good is coming from that.
Oh man. But yeah, that Lonnie Bahanis, and I think we'll cut. But I just like he's one of those ones, and Brandon too. I'm still buddies with. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. He's not returning my texts anymore. I don't know what happened to him. But Connor and I used to be pretty good buddies. I'm gonna have to try and reach out to him again because I think he'd be amazing on this show too. I'd love to talk with him. Lonnie as well. But God, Lonnie could play, man. Hey, like, and the weird part with him is, and Diesel and I talked about him a little bit, Mark Dale, when he was on, but like. He succeeded every time he went up at the NHL level, and especially that 1 year with Toronto. Like he left us, he went up and like almost single-handedly, and I say that like for real, like got the Leafs into the second round.
Yeah.
Like he was making plays happen, scoring goals, like without other guys helping him out, like being a big league player, and never to be heard from again. Almost.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him. I don't. I do remember that. Though. He was dangerous from all over the ice. He was a nightmare for defensemen because he was small, he was shifty, and he could just shoot a cannon from anywhere.
And effortless, right? Like his game was so easy for him. Yeah. Like it just seemed like it was, at least. But anyways, man. Well, I really appreciate all your honesty, vulnerability. That's such a weird word, vulnerability, but I like using it now because I think it's so important. Like even like I'm a mental performance coach for the Salmon Arm Silverbacks out here, and I've used that word with them, right? With these teenage, tough, gladiator style guys, and I'm like, the more vulnerable you can be with each other, and I don't mean that in like a, sunshine and rainbows kind of way, but like honest, right? Have discussions that you want to have and be honest about those discussions. Like that's vulnerable, right? And if you do that, like that, not only does it allow you to get out of your own head, whatever that thing is, but allows you guys to connect in different ways, right? To have real conversations and to grow together. So when I say that word for you, I just mean that. Like you're just authentically saying what you feel and what you went through. And a lot of people choose the opposite, right? And we still want to go in protect mode, and we still want to, do these things. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's amazing. I think the more we can share stories like that, not only does your experience then work for you, but your experience can work for the people who are listening here now. So,
well, I mean, I wasn't always like that for sure. It's only in kind of the last few years that I've been kind of opened up about it, and that's just a lot of kind of processing internally. But I'm such a fan of what you're doing there, in engaging people and having these, creating an outlet for these types of conversations to happen. I mean, that's how it starts. And when I was DMing with you, and I said, if we can help maybe one kid, maybe get his head on straight, or just help him excel even further from where he is, then I'd be more than happy to share. So hopefully there is a kid out there, and through our experiences and our thoughts, that we've helped them a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I think there will be for sure. I think the more people that understand that support works, and support is, I don't even I like to choose my words. I don't know if that's the right word, but like I call it like a team. Like have a team, like a high performance team. Like, I mean, that can be mom and dad, that can be your coach. I mean, that's whatever it is for you. But like think of that inner circle, right? Like who's around you, and what type of things are you filling yourself up with, right? Like what type of things are you growing with? And yeah, I mean, for you to say that, to be so eloquent with what you said there, with the profound impact that your relationship had with the sports psychologist that you were seeking out. I mean, it's awesome, because I still think that there is like a stigma for parents and for players about what that is and who needs it or who doesn't. There's just a world out there, unless you've been through it or been exposed to it, that is so massively beneficial. And if you even want to look at it from a high performance standpoint, a competitive advantage, like Yeah, like to not explore it seems absolutely ridiculous to me. So, yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, our parallels are pretty unique and cool at the same time. So, Waresy, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for connecting. Let's keep let's keep our relationship going.
For sure.
Really nice to see you again. And yeah, thanks for sharing with everybody here today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. Another interview in the books, Mr. Jeff Ware. If you are still listening, where's he? Solid stuff, man. Really solid stuff. I really appreciate you coming on. First of all, I really appreciate you being willing to go where you went and to share what you did. And I think that we're all better for it. So for those of you still listening, I just love what we covered there. I love the topics. I love the fact that he was able to so perfectly say, what was going on for him, as a 20-year-old playing pro hockey in Newfoundland. Like, there's a lot there. And so if you're a parent or if you're a player listening and there is something going on for you right now, there's something happening. There's something happening off the ice or even some dynamic on ice that is in your head, right? It's in your thoughts. And it can get the best of us if it's not managed properly, if it's not directed properly. We often look 6 inches in front of our face and we can't see what's a little bit down the road, even around the corner or around the next bend. And having somebody to share what it is you're going through helps. If you're not willing to go there, find someone like me or find a sports psychologist or a buddy. Use a journal. Write it down. Get stuff out of your head. That is, like, both of those are very, very highly recommended by me. And when you're doing that, when you are writing, when you are engaging, when you are talking, try and build your skill of self-awareness. Try and build that idea of what is really happening here and what is really in front of me that I can help myself with. One of the things when I'm working with private clients, or anyone for that matter, is I challenge them to ask different questions. Right? So the questions you ask yourself are the ones you're going to find answers to. And oftentimes when we get stuck in these downward spirals or we start feeling sorry for ourselves or victimized, or we're in a slump or things aren't going well, we're asking ourselves questions that are getting answers to questions we really don't want to have. Like, why am I not scoring? Why am I on the fourth line? Why does the coach not like me? Our brain's a brilliant instrument, right? But it's not this thing that just knows exactly what it's supposed to do all the time. Like, it requires direction, and so it takes the direction given. So when you ask questions like that, it gives you answers to those questions, and those answers aren't necessarily helping you. All they're doing is perpetuating the situation that you're in. So if you're finding yourself in a situation that's not great, that's not ideal, ask yourself questions that you're going to get answers that are going to help you, right? Like, where's the opportunity in this moment? What can I learn about myself right now? Is there support that I need to help me get myself out of this? What support could I use? What things can I do tomorrow to help myself, right? Those are questions that are going to give you different answers, and they completely shift the narrative of the story in front of you. And that's one thing that Jeff obviously has been able to do over the years, is to be able to now look back on that and to be able to unpack some different meanings to those areas that affected him so significantly back when he was playing. And even now in life situations, he is able to understand the moment better. And when I work with athletes, that is one thing I talk about, is closing the gap. So all of you parents or players out there, you understand closing the gap as being this hockey term, right? The gap between the forwards and the defensemen, and you want to keep that gap tight and keep it snug so there's not room for the forwards to move. But it applies in your mental thoughts too, in the stories that you're telling yourself about the events that you are living in. If you can close the gap between this perceived negative event and how you find an opportunity in that event, or how you find a positive way to move forward through it, that is helping you, right? Then we're not getting these big, deep valleys and these downward spirals. So the better our ability, our mental ability to close the gap, what I call mental agility, the better. So anyways, there's a little mindset coaching for you on the heels of Jeff's amazing story. And if you're still here, thanks for listening. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.